I got the call in late September. The air had already turned sharp in the mornings, that kind of cold that reminds you summer's over, even if the leaves haven't caught up yet. The district office wanted someone to check on a patch of woodland up north, Alder's Hollow. Technically, it wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. The area had been closed off in the 90s after a series of wildfires, but satellite readings showed new activity. Campfires, smoke trails, maybe squatters. So they sent me. It was supposed to be a 2-day solo assessment, photograph the area, mark any illegal activity, and radio in coordinates. Easy work, quiet, the kind I liked. The first few hours were normal enough. The highway dwindled to gravel and then to dirt. By the time I hit the forest edge, my cell signal was gone, and the only sound was the crunch of tires on frost. There wasn't a sign, no gate, just a narrow trail swallowed by pine. The forest was dense, old, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. When I stepped out of the truck, I realized it smelled strange. Not bad, just off. Like the air was heavier than it should have been. Sweet and damp, like moss after rain. I set up camp near the tree line and logged my coordinates manually. Sunlight barely made it past the canopy. It had that perpetual dusk feel even in mid-afternoon. The deeper I walked, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just wind moving through pine needles. I started marking trees with orange flag tape to keep my path, but after half an hour, I saw one of my own flags ahead of me. That shouldn't have been possible. At first, I figured I must have looped back, but the ground didn't match my footprints. The earth looked untouched. Still, I convinced myself I'd made a mistake. It was easy to do in terrain like that. Except, I'd tied that first flag in a double knot. The one in front of me was tied clean, like someone had replaced it. By sundown, the fog started rolling in. It wasn't thick, but it moved oddly, low, clinging to the ground like it was alive. I heard something faint then, a kind of whispering too soft to make out. At first I thought it was the wind moving through the trees, but then it stopped when I did. That night I built a fire and wrote up my field notes. I remember noting that the forest seemed unusually symmetrical, the way the trees grew in perfect alignment, almost like rows planted by hand. At around 11 p.m., I heard twigs snapping somewhere beyond the firelight. Could have been an animal. But then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. I called out, thinking maybe it was a hiker, but no one answered. The steps stopped right at the edge of the light. When I shone my flashlight, there was nothing there, just trees and fog. But for a second, I swear I saw something standing between the trunks. Tall. Still. Wrong. And then it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The forest sounded like it was breathing. By morning, the fog hadn't lifted. It just sat there, low and milky, like the forest didn't want to wake up. Everything was quiet again, but not the kind of peaceful quiet you'd expect. This was different, heavy, watchful. I packed up and decided to push deeper into the woods. If anyone had been camping here, they'd have left signs, trash, embers, anything. Instead, all I found were symbols. The first one was carved into a pine trunk, clean, sharp, about chest height. A circle, bisected by a jagged line. At first I thought it was vandalism, maybe old surveyor marks, but the cuts were fresh. And as I moved further in, I started finding more of them. Different symbols, always low to the ground, like someone had knelt to carve them. Each one was facing the same direction, north. After the fourth or fifth, I started taking photos. The bark around the carvings had bled sap so dark it looked like the trees were leaking tar. The forest floor was thick with needles, but I noticed something strange about the soil. It wasn't just dark, it was black, burnt almost, and yet there were no signs of fire. Around noon, I came across the remains of an old trail marker, a wooden post, splintered and half buried. Stamped into the metal plate were the words, Alder's Hollow Trail, established 1901. There wasn't supposed to be anything left of that settlement. It was wiped out decades ago, the official report said. Wildfires and unrecovered remains. But the deeper I went, the more I found. Fences, rusted to skeletons. Stone foundations buried under moss. And in the center of it all, a well. Sealed with wooden planks, wrapped in chains that looked far too new for a place this old. Something about it made my stomach twist. The air around it was colder. Noticeably colder. Every time the wind shifted, the chains clinked like something moving just below the boards. I crouched to take a closer photo and noticed something carved into the stones around the well. The same circle symbol again, but this time surrounded by tiny hash marks, hundreds of them, all burned into the rock. Almost like tally marks. I didn't count them. I didn't want to. When I stood up, I realized the forest had gone completely still again. No wind, no sound. Even my own breath felt too loud. That's when I heard it, from somewhere far off between the trees. A single note, a low, drawn-out hum. Not human, not mechanical, just ancient. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, then silence again. I turned on my radio, but all I got was static. A faint, rhythmic pulse came through. Faint at first, then louder. For a second, I thought it was interference. But it wasn't random. It was in time with my heartbeat. By the time I got back to camp, the fog had thickened into a wall. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The ground felt softer underfoot. Not mud, more like breathing earth. When I lit the fire that night, it didn't burn right. The flames flickered sideways, drawn toward the woods, and just before midnight I heard whispering again, clearer this time. It was coming from the well. I don't remember deciding to walk back to the well that night. It felt like I was drawn there. The fog had thinned just enough to make the trees look like silhouettes, stretched tall and warped by moonlight. By the time I reached the clearing, the air felt different, dense, charged. The boards over the well were slick with frost. The chains around it rattled softly, even though there was no wind. The whispering was still there. Faint, layered, like multiple voices murmuring just below the surface. Too low to understand, but rhythmic, almost like a chant. I should have turned back right then. But curiosity has a way of numbing fear. I set my flashlight on the ground and started examining the boards. They weren't nailed down, just heavy, held in place by the weight of the chain. When I brushed away the frost, I saw the carvings again. Circles and tally marks burned along the wood in perfect spacing. Every mark looked identical. Everyone seemed to count something. I unhooked a few links and lifted one of the boards just enough to shine my light inside. The beam disappeared almost instantly, swallowed by darkness. The well was deeper than it should have been. No sound when I dropped a pebble. No splash, just silence. Then, a single breath came up from below. Slow, wet, real. I dropped the board and stumbled back, knocking over my flashlight. The beam spun across the clearing and caught something on the ground near the stones, a patch of earth disturbed, like it had been dug up recently. I brushed the dirt away with my boot and saw what looked like bone. Not animal. There were carvings on it too. A sudden gust of wind ripped through the clearing, strong enough to scatter the ashes of my campfire. And for a split second, the whispering turned into something else. A word, clear enough to make my blood run cold. Stay. The sound came from everywhere at once. Inside the well, behind me, inside my own head. I froze. The forest had gone completely still again, but I could feel something watching. Close. Almost touching distance. When I turned to grab my flashlight, the light caught movement in the fog. A shape standing just beyond the trees. Tall. Thin. Its head tilted slightly, like it was listening. The light flickered once, twice, and then went out. The next few minutes are a blur. I remember running, branches slapping against my face, my breath tearing through the silence. No matter which direction I turned, the trail kept looping back on itself. the trees repeating, the same split trunk, the same mossy stone. When I finally reached my tent, it was gone. In its place was a perfect circle of flattened pine needles, the ground still warm, as if something had been standing there just moments before. My radio crackled to life again suddenly. Through the static, a voice, my own voice, whispered, "You shouldn't have opened it." Then the signal cut. By morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Sleep deprivation, stress, isolation, they can twist your mind in ways you don't notice until it's too late. I told myself the voice on the radio was feedback. The figure in the fog was just a trick of the light. But that lie only held until I started hearing myself again. I found a ranger outpost about 2 miles east. The map said it had been abandoned years ago. The windows were boarded, the roof sagged inward, but there was still a working generator inside. I thought maybe I could use the radio tower to call in a check-in report. When I powered it up, the speakers hissed, the same static hum I'd heard the night before. Then, a familiar sound came through. My own voice. "Base, this is Ranger Colin. I'm back at Alder's Hollow, requesting..." It cut off right there. That was my transmission from yesterday. I hadn't replayed it. No tapes were loaded. It was just broadcasting itself. The generator stuttered and died a moment later, but I swear the static kept whispering under the silence, mimicking my breathing, repeating my pauses. I stepped outside for air and realized something worse. My footprints from earlier weren't alone anymore. Right beside them, a second set, bare. They followed every one of my steps, matching them perfectly. I called out, but my voice bounced back to me in a way that didn't sound right, like the forest was repeating it, not echoing it. Each time I spoke, the words came back a half-second late, slower, stretched. "Hello? Low. Colin." The last one made my chest tighten. I hadn't said my name. The fog began to drift closer then, thicker than before, swirling unnaturally against the wind. Through it, I saw movement again. Not a single figure this time, but several. All standing in the tree line, motionless. All facing me. Their outlines looked like mine. The same height, the same build, even the same ranger jacket. When I lifted my flashlight, they lifted theirs. When I took a step back, they mirrored me. It wasn't just an echo, it was reflection. And when I whispered, "Who are you?" one of them, the one closest to the well, raised its head. My own face stared back at me, but the eyes were black, completely black. Then, all at once, every light went out. My flashlight, the generator, even the moon seemed to fade behind the fog. And from the darkness, dozens of whispers rose, all in my voice. "You opened it. You woke us. Now we remember." The forest itself felt alive, like it was breathing, like every tree and root was part of one enormous thing finally stirring. I ran again, but this time, I wasn't sure which one of me was doing the running. I didn't stop running until the forest broke open into a clearing. The fog thinned just enough for me to see a cluster of half-collapsed cabins, the old Alder's Hollow settlement. It was supposed to have burned down decades ago, but the fire hadn't touched everything. One cabin still stood, crooked but intact, its door slightly ajar. A light flickered inside, soft, yellow, human. I stepped in slowly, my breath ragged, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was thick with dust and pine rot, but under it, something else. A faint warmth, like I'd walked into someone's home mid-breath. And then I saw it, a photograph pinned to the wall. Black and white. 5 rangers. One of them unmistakably me. Only, the date printed at the bottom said 1972. The photo was older than me, older than my parents. I backed away, my pulse hammering, when something on the table caught my eye. A ranger logbook. Leather-bound, cracked, still open to the last entry. It read, "Patrol lost beyond the hollow. Static on the radio. They come back wrong." If anyone finds this, don't answer your own voice." That was when the door creaked behind me. I spun around, and there I was, standing in the doorway. Same face, same uniform, same trembling flashlight. But his eyes weren't black anymore. They were mine. "We've been here before," he said softly. "Every time we forget, every time we try again." The walls began to pulse, not move, but breathe. The light from the lantern flickered like it was alive, casting dozens of shadows across the room. Every shadow was me. "You think you came here to patrol," the other me whispered. "But you're part of it now. The hollow doesn't let go, it remembers." He stepped closer. I tried to raise my hand, but he mirrored me perfectly, like I was the reflection this time. And then, his voice deepened, the tone turning low, resonant, layered with something beneath it. 100 voices, all overlapping mine. We were the first to mark the forest, the first to lose our names. The hollow gave us new ones. He pressed his palm to my chest. Cold spread through me, crawling under my skin, filling my lungs with frost. And just like that, I wasn't cold anymore. I wasn't anything. I saw flashes. Every ranger who'd ever vanished here, walking the woods endlessly, calling their own names through the mist, waiting to hear an answer. Then darkness. When I woke, it was daylight. The forest was calm, the fog gone, but the radio on my shoulder crackled. Static. Then my voice, faint and distant. "Base, this is Ranger Colin. I'm back at Alder's Hollow, requesting," and just like before, it cut off.
"This is Ranger Melissa Hart. I've arrived at Alder's Hollow checkpoint to investigate a missing person report. Ranger Colin West. Last known signal was transmitted 3 nights ago. Tracking beacons still active." The recording continues. Static hum, faint wind, boots crunching over pine needles. Then, "Jesus, someone's been here. There's a tent by the ridge. Looks recent. Radio equipment too. Power's dead, but..." Pause. His logbook's open. Pages turn. The sound is muffled. Entry dated last week. Mentions voices in the fog. Strange radio interference. He says the forest talks back. Nervous laugh. "Probably exhaustion. These woods can mess with you." Another silence. Then the faintest sound. Someone calling her name through the trees. "Hello? Who's out there?" It comes again, a little closer. Same voice, same tone. "Melissa," she gasps softly. "Okay, that's not funny. If that's you, Colin, I swear..." The radio screeches, a violent burst of static. When it clears, a calm male voice comes through. "Base, this is Ranger Colin. I'm back at Alder's Hollow, requesting..." The transmission ends. No one ever found Melissa Hart. Only her vehicle, engine still running, doors wide open, parked exactly 1 mile from the hollow. Locals say that if you walk past the old ranger trail after dark, you can still hear them. Voices calling through the static, repeating the same words again and again. We're back. We never left. And sometimes when the fog rolls down from the mountains, the forest breathes like it's alive. Because it is. And it's remembering you.